Hello, culture makers. Welcome back to this series where we're applying the principle that everything that's been used against you can be a source of power. I'm Kelly Diels. I am a writer and a feminist marketing consultant. And today I'm here with my friend and thought partner, Meghna Majmudar. Meghna is an executive coach and a strategy partner. And she has a coaching company called Meghnoya Advising. You can find her at the-permission.com. And Meghna has been so influential in my life because last year we had a conversation about power, and Meghna made me do an exercise about power that literally reorganized my personal cosmos. And so what I wanted to do today is ask Meghna to take us through that exercise. Because here's why it's significant. When you realize you have a certain subconscious belief about power, you realize where you might have been playing small. And you can start just releasing that and doing something different. So Meghna, can you tell me a little bit about your philosophy about power and why you take people through this exercise?
Yeah, and I'm thinking it might just be more helpful to do the exercise right now, really quickly, so people have information, and then I can share a little bit about the philosophy and how I got to it. So the exercise is really simple, and I'll explain it afterwards. But basically, I'm going to say 3 different words, and I just want you to write down the first thought that comes to your head. It could be a word, it could be an image, it could be a feeling you have in your body. Just kind of write down what's the first reaction that you have. And so the first word, and I just want you to finish this statement. Power is. Or power equals. So take a couple of seconds, finish that. Next word, authority is, or authority equals. And the final word is leadership. So leadership is. Or leadership equals. Okay, that's the exercise. So hopefully you'll be able to recall the elements. So I have been some might call a student of power. So I was born in India, grew up in Boston, went to an Ivy League, went into corporate America, and just kind of was always so astonished by how things moved, how decisions were made. And I was just like, I don't understand what's going on. And so I went to business school, then I moved to New York and was just asking questions of like, why do people do certain things? Why do decisions get made a certain way? What is this thing called power? And I think like this really became clear when I was making the decision to go to college. I got into Harvard and the University of Chicago, both great schools. And I was like trying to decide between the two. And I met this alum who had gone to both schools, one for undergrad and the other for grad school. And what he said was, you're going to get a great education at either school. The thing is, if you end up going to Harvard, you're also going to get an education in power. And I didn't really know what he meant. And I think now when I look back, I get it. There's a way that people in society operate that take these ideas into account that isn't just about what you learn in a book. It happens in the conversations you have in your dorm room. And, it's since graduating from college that, I'm seeing classmates of mine become world leaders. And I'm able to see the seeds of what they were when we were together in college and now what they are on the global stage. And being able to fill in those blanks, I'm like, oh, I get it. I understand power in a different way than I would have otherwise.
Well, and I think this is particularly interesting. The reason you and I keep talking about this, like we meet regularly every week and we are talking about power every week and trying to figure out our own power moves in this world. So I am the first person in my family to graduate from university. And that's significant, obviously. And you work with people who you call first and onlys. And my friend Jennifer McClenaghan Flint, who used to be my coach, she also says she works with people who are first and onlys. And we have different understandings of power than people who have been raised in more sort of privileged identities or are more fluent with the rules of power in different spaces. And so can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I might use a slightly different words. So let me explain what I mean by firsts and onlys. So firsts are the first from their family and community, or the only one like them in the room. So the only woman, the first person of color, the youngest, the oldest, differently abled, whatever, the only person without a college education,
Right.
The only person from another country in a certain team or organization. So there's an outsiderness that happens. And so first and onlys, so it's funny, when I first started thinking about where I want to focus in terms of coaching, there were lots of different terms used: minority leadership, or people of color, or immigrants, or this or that. And in all of those, I felt there was a kind of othering and lessening of the experience. And by using first and onlys, there's a real respect paid to the kind of pioneering work you have to do. And so what makes it especially difficult for firsts and or onlys is that they're an outsider to the dominant paradigm, and they're also navigating the places from which they come. So, for example, in my experience, when I think back to my adolescence, I often got the question, from both people here in the States and my family in India: do you consider yourself Indian or American? And I was like, can't I be both? and there's that tension of, wow, we have multiple identities, and we're consistently asked to operate and perform in one of them primarily. And it makes it really difficult. And so the rules you learned in your family, you take it into a new environment. You are the ambassador, the diplomat who goes to the new environment, and you may not have the right understandings, frameworks, tools to work with. So, for example, growing up in my Indian immigrant family was always about hard work and studying, not about socializing. And I still remember, there was always a raised eyebrow when I talked about going to a party at college or things like that. But it was in going to those parties and meeting other people and having certain conversations, or talking with people late into the night about certain ideas that really helped develop me into the person I am. And so I felt kind of guilty that I was doing all this social stuff, even though I really enjoyed it and it let me play. And then it's an uncomfortable moment for person onlys.
Right. And I'm looking at it sort of two ways at once. So what I know from being the first in my family to go to university, so from being a working class family where money was tight, and my parents were the first ones to do sort of as well as that. It was the same as what you described, which is put your head down and work. Really just work hard. That's the recipe. That's the thing that's going to get you where you want to go. And in one way, that served me exceptionally well, because I can put my head down and work and knock something out and do things when my back is against the wall. And that's certainly what helped me earn scholarships and all of those things. So in one way, that is a source of power, right? It's been a great launch pad. And in times of trouble, I can launch something and I can work hard and I can knock something out of the park. And that emphasis on hard work has sometimes prevented me from understanding how power works in different spaces, where the emphasis on hard work isn't going to get me where I need to go. What I actually need to do is do what you did and make relationships and, be part of a give and take and be part of a network and learn from other people instead of just putting my head down and trying to grind it out.
Yeah, and there's, somewhat of a vulnerability of, now I'm a very relationship-oriented person, and to go to people in my network and ask them for help, to ask them for advice puts me in a vulnerable position, and that's part of it. And this vulnerability is something, especially if you're a first and only, you don't like to show, because it might be used against you. You may not know all the rules. I don't know if I've ever shared this story with you of very early on, I realized I don't think I know all the rules. And I've been motivated to understand what the rules are. So imagine this. So moved to the US when I'm like 5, turning 6. And then in second grade, I'm 7 years old, I end up winning the spelling bee in my school for the second grade. Then I go to district and win that. And then all of a sudden, I'm in the citywide spelling bee at Faneuil Hall in Boston. And my mom's in the back of the room and she's never been in a room that big. And I'm just like, what's going on? Get to the finals and it's finally me and this other guy. And I get this word, deceived, and I spell it wrong. The next day, the Boston Globe writes it up and it's like, oh, if only Meghna knew the rule, I before E except for C. She would have spelled it right. And that still sticks with me. Like I still see that paragraph in the newspaper. And that's kind of, I think, the pebble that keeps motivating me to focus on what are these rules that we're playing with.
Well, and one of the things that I love so much about you is your perspective on isn't what are the rules we can play with so that we can just fit into the status quo and keep playing by those rules. You're like, what are the rules so that we know them and then we can play outside the rules, but you actually know what the shape is, or we can play it, as you say, play the game to change the game.
Yep, exactly. So let's go back to that exercise.
Yes.
I want to just kind of put it to rest so that we can get into some even juicier stuff. So power is, do you have any kind of input from people who may be watching or if you've done this yourself? So power is or power equals.
So I would invite anyone who's watching, if you want to fill in the blank in the comments, that would be great. And we can draw you into the conversation and riff on what you're saying. But for right now, I'll just tell you what I answered when Meghna asked me this last year. She asked me to fill in the blank, power is. And I had this full sort of body reaction to it. I was like, power is abuse. Power will be used against me. Mm-hmm. And when that just popped through, power gets used against me, there was this almost, as we discussed earlier, almost instant integration of, I realized what operating manual I had been using, what I believed about power, and then why I had, in some places, inadvertently caused harm because I wasn't taking account for my power. I realized why I was playing small in my own life and my own business. And I realized why I wasn't seeing the leadership in me that other people have been seeing in me. And it was because I was fundamentally afraid of power, because in my own life, as a survivor of sexual abuse, power had been used against me. Power, that was a real experience. That's not just in my head, that was a real experience. Yeah. So that's my formative experience with power. And I'm now, at that moment, even as I was trying to grow my career and be creative and make a contribution to our culture, fundamentally afraid of holding power because power is abuse. That was what was going on subconsciously in my head. And when you asked me that question and that popped through, I immediately was like, well, that's not true. There are so many different forms of power. There are creative, communal, generative, life-giving forms of power. Power as abuse is just like the most skeletal, unskilled, weak, unimaginative form of power there is. And that's not the only one.
Yeah, and it is a construct. And what I want to draw people's attention to, and I love the comments, power is scary. Power is the right to do you, especially when one's desires change over time and current experience. Power equals choice and the ability to make change. Power is control. Power is strength. Hi, Mom.
I also just want to point out that Jennifer, I love that your mom is here. That's so wonderful.
Yay.
Jennifer McClanahan Flint is in the comments too, and I mentioned her earlier in our talk. So Jennifer was my coach and has been really pivotal in my life, and she is the one who also uses the term firsts and onlys. Great. And I just wanted to say, hi, Jennifer. You've been so influential. I hope everyone knows you.
Yeah, and then someone says, I see power from a practical perspective. Power is what makes an engine run. So you can see that there's a wide spectrum of what power is defined as internally. So there's some that are more on the positive, kind of like leaning towards power, like willing to work with it. There's the also the frame of power is external and something to push away from. And so, okay, so very quickly, authority is, how did you answer that?
I took it as like authority is bossiness, dominance, making you do things you don't want to do.
Okay, great. And and leadership is?
I don't know. That's literally what leadership is. That's what popped into my head was, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, great. And yay. Jennifer's giving you big ups too. So what we just did was an exercise in complex equivalence. So I'm trained in neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, and they have this thing called complex equivalence. It's how we code other people's behavior. And so your coding of authority is really interesting, of its bossiness and its dominating. There's something when someone is being that way in the world, they're an authority figure. That's what authority looks like. So then when it comes to you being in the world as an authority figure, there's going to be a part of you, if it has a negative feeling, negative connotation with the word authority, it's going to shy away from it.
Right. Exactly.
And you were talking about that with power. And so with authority now, like as bossiness and dominating, so what the complex equivalence let us do is we beeline to the core belief about that topic, about that term. So okay, do you want to be authority as sovereignty? That too. Again, the spectrum. So it's just like, do you have definitions that you aspire to step into? And if you don't, what's the work that can help shift that?
So after we had done this exercise last year, it really was such a revelation to me. It was like, oh, I have been shying away from power and authority and leadership, even when people see those qualities in me, because I've made the equivalence that it's abuse, that it's domination, that it's oppression. And so the thing I sort of released in that moment is like, well, that doesn't have to be true. And what I kept telling myself was, I trust you with power and leadership. I trust you with power and resources. I can be trusted with those things. Right. And that has been huge for me. And it's one of the reasons that I'm like leaning now into my own abilities, into my relationships, into my creativity, and not trying to hide behind my work.
Yeah. So what about, I trust you with authority, Kelly?
Yes.
You like look away. You're like,
it's because I had a fight with my 13-year-old last night about exactly this topic.
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, I have teenagers, so authority is a bit of a fraught issue right now in our
Yeah.
house.
Yeah. And there's the authority as mom,
Yeah.
and then the authority as the culture maker.
Yeah.
And so much I feel of the culture makers, they're saying something different
Yeah.
to the establishment, right? That's how we make culture. And so really being into step into, I don't have a PhD. I just wrote a report on leadership. I don't put a single statistic in it, but I have the authority of hundreds of hours coaching first and onlys
Yeah.
through these things. And so, what is the authority you can stand on when you're making a new culture?
Well, and you've said to me other times, like, where are you sourcing your power? And that's sort of what I want people watching to think about is, where are they sourcing their power? Where are they sourcing their strength? And when we think about authority as this thing that you have earned, that you have created, that you have made, that's different than I'm going to exercise like unjust authority over other people's behavior, actions, lives. It's totally different. It's like, this thing is the thing that I made and I earned.
Yeah, it's I am authority. I am imperfect authority, but I am an authority, and I have solid ground to stand on.
So I want to talk a little bit about, for those of us who were shying away from power. I think this is actually something we see in women's spaces a lot. So think about the dominance of the word empowerment versus power, right? How often do we go into women's spaces and talk about empowerment and be super excited about it and feel great about it, but not ever use the word power? Because it feels like, power is a bad thing. It's something that gets used against us, right? I know this intimately. So I personally shy away a little bit from the word empowerment now, because I feel like it's a way that we're putting a pink bow on the thing that we're actually talking about. And what is the root word in empowerment? Power. Em and mint are like modifications of it. Yeah. We're talking about power. But what I notice when I speak to my culture making community is, if I were to say something like, I want power, people would feel uncomfortable. And if I ask people in my circle to say that for themselves, like to say, I want power, they're often going to feel really uncomfortable with that. Again, it's because that association with power as abuse and oppression and domination. But you did something when we were talking about this that completely shifted this for me. So you said, what if instead of saying, I want power, which is actually a totally okay thing to say, right? If we're thinking about it as a creative life force, I want power. What if you say, though, instead, I am power? How does that change for you?
Yeah. Yeah. And it allows you to hopefully have a personal connection to it of, right. I am authority. I am a leader. And to put your own transmission of energy into it.
Yes.
So it is your own definition of it.
So when I think about that and I think I am power, I think I am protection. I protect my children. I think I am a culture maker. I am contribution. I am writing. I am thinking. I am care. Those are the things that I'm thinking into and feeling into when I say I am power. Yeah. Those are my sources of power. Yeah. Care, protection, analysis, writing.
Yeah, and I think if there's so many places I want to go with this, but if you go into the kind of more religious and spiritual texts that talk about being separate from, and it's not. It's I love the commenter Annie who's saying, I have power. Empowerment denies that. It's like, yes, we're not separate from. Yeah. It's we're aligned with, and how can we align with the energy of power, the energy of authority, the energy of leadership that we want to be in the world. And so that's what I wish for anyone who works with me, is my friend. Like, how can we have a really authentic and exciting expression of our trueness in the world?
Well, and one of the reasons I wanted you to come on and do this exercise with everyone was because if we are actually going to change our culture, and if we are going to flourish in our personal lives and in our careers, we actually have to get comfortable with power. We can't leave power to the domain of the people who are going to abuse it. Like, it's significant.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the places where all of the conversation about women's leadership, women in business, we have shied away from the conversation about power because, for a lot of people, there's a dead end into sexual power and sexual politics and kind of having so many stories of trauma in that way. And so there's a lot, it's a very deep and dark well that we have to walk through to reclaim power in a meaningful way as women. And
there's something else too that you and I have talked about, which is there is a way in which power can be a threat to our current ties, to current belonging. So if we embrace and embody power, that can threaten relationships in our communities, in our families, in our intimate partnerships. That shift in identity can be a threat to belonging. So I feel sometimes when we are shying away from the word power and using empowerment instead of power and talking about feminine leadership instead of leadership, that's what we're sort of implicitly naming is we fear that growing in personal power and growing in leadership might be a threat to our circles of sisterhood, to our friendships, to our families, to our partnerships. And I don't actually think that fear is misplaced. I think that's real.
Yeah. One of the really amazing and difficult things about this kind of personal change and personal development is as you integrate and operate from these new levels of insight, you have to allow the people you love in your life to stay where they are. I know that like a lot of people will just be like, this is so great for me, come along. And I was like that for a long time. I know there's at least one person on this call who can attest to the fact, who very often told me, please don't coach me.
Hi, Mom.
And there is so much respect in letting people stay where they are.
And do their own journey, right? They don't have to be on the same path as you to love and care for people and be in relationship. You don't have to be walking the same road.
Right.
When you said that, sorry.
So I just wanted to bring back that yes, once you start making these changes, you may not belong in circles where it was really important to belong. And so are there other ways of expressing your belonging with those circles? So for example, there are certain ways I have to operate in the world that make it very difficult to belong in my culture or in my family. And so it's just like, actually, can I appreciate what I did get from that? So one of the things, I learned how to cook. I know food. I know lentils. I can cook a lentil. And so just now when I'm doing that, because I have to so much now, just really appreciating everything that it took to learn all the things I did. And appreciate the belonging from there, even though I live so far away from my family.
That is so beautiful and touching. And we don't have to let go of things that have been sources of comfort and power in order to embrace our own leadership or our own authority. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that comes back to that point that I keep trying to make, which is that everything that is who we are, even if it's been used against us, even if it's become a threat, can also still be a source of fuel and something that propels us forward in creativity. Mm-hmm. And you said something that I had an oof moment about, which is your instinct was always like, everybody needs to come with me. Let me take you with me. And I know that I did that too. And there was a moment in time where I missed a lot of warning signs because I was so wanting to take people with me that I missed that they didn't want to come. right? They didn't want to come, and that there were actually people who, because they didn't want to come and felt threatened by my change, are then going to lash out and try to stop me from going where I'm going because they don't want to go. But we just don't have to do that with each other. We just don't. We need to have a little more respect. I needed to have a little more respect for the people around me and the journeys that they were on. They don't need to come on mine.
Yeah. And so one of the things that's a little bit more subtle and really important is, so when we're doing this work around power, authority, leadership, there's a sense where there's the internal work of the power and, how it sits in us, the beliefs we have, the mindsets and behaviors we have, how we show up when we're in power and authority. And then there's the external world and in the external world, power is played in terms of politics and social status. And so this is something we talk about. And so there are all those tropes of money is power and power corrupts and blah, 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 and all of this. And that's an external world political thing and so when you are good with power inside, you can navigate that external world more effectively with more influence, i.e. more power.
Well, and this comes back to the reason we're having this talk anyway, is that we were saying we didn't understand the invisible rules of power. And I feel like that's actually true more generally of, if we don't have the ability to understand the systems and structures we're navigating, like if we can't zoom out and say, oh, well, that's how institutions work. Oh, that's how white supremacy works. Oh, that's how patriarchy works. You can't navigate it, and you get whipsawed and walloped by it because you can't see it. It's all invisible. But as soon as you can see it, you can see the invisible rules of power. Now you can move and navigate and be evasive and be strategic.
Yes, and some people really enjoy tapping into that inner Machiavelli, and other people feel really uncomfortable with it. It feels so inauthentic, and at that moment, it's really about what is the bigger thing you are playing for. As a culture maker, you might have to promote, you might have to say positive things about yourself.
Yes.
And that may not feel comfortable because it's not the way it is in your family. But to market, to sell, you have to really believe in yourself. So how do you cross that chasm?
Yeah. Well, part of it is you just do it. Like, you build the muscle by do it. I see a lot of people who are writers talking about finding your voice. And the truth is, we find our voice by using it, by practicing it. And so I feel it's the same with these things. Like, how do you get comfortable, taking up space in the public sphere? Well, you actually have to take risks, calculated risks, and keep doing it. And it's a little challenging, and it doesn't necessarily feel that great inside, but eventually your window of tolerance expands and you get more comfortable with it. And even you and I, like, to be transparent with everyone, this is what we're doing right now. Meghna just wrote a report called the F&O Leadership Report about power, exactly the kinds of things we're talking about, mapping out 3 dilemmas that firsts and onlys face when they're dealing with power, leadership, and authority, and like how to navigate that. And why is Meghna doing that? Meghna is doing that to get this culture making work out in the world so we're equipped to navigate power better, but it's also because she needs to take up more space in the world. She needs to promote. Why am I doing these Facebook Lives? Because I need to take up more space in the world and promote. So we get comfortable doing the very thing we're talking about by promoting, by taking up space, even if it's like a new activity for us. We just keep doing it until we get comfortable, and then we can do more of it.
So I see a very juicy comment.
It too.
So do you want to read it out loud, and we can all explore it together?
Jennifer McClanahan Flint. This is like, you are a woman of my heart. You've been so influential in my life. So Jennifer says, I do think that women sometimes default to influence instead of outright power. We are accustomed to playing the chess game to position people to help us get what we need. While that's not wrong or bad, it does limit our ability to exert power, to make a decision without worrying about the vulnerability and consequence. Yes, that is the truth. Do you want to riff on that, Meghna?
I just need a minute to let it sink in a little bit more. So we are playing the chess game to position people. Well, that isn't wrong or bad. It does limit our ability to exert power. Yeah, I think there's something in the verb of power. So one of the threads that I let go early on in this conversation is, so growing up in Boston, I got to take 6 years of Latin. Power comes from the word potens. That's Latin for power. I think it is a male noun. Potential, like power, comes from potens. So the potentiality and the verb is there. This is all the women in the Bible. Yes.
So what I'm taking from Jennifer's comment is, you know what? We have to give ourselves permission to go straight at the thing we want and to learn whatever skills it takes to go get the thing we want. And I feel like this is almost the same revelation I've had around body positivity and fat acceptance. I was using dieting to get love and affection and power and status. But why don't I just go directly at the thing that I want and build a career instead?
Yeah. And I think there is this theme of, we need to like manipulate to get what we want.
Right.
What Susan and I think Jennifer are alluding to is like influence and chess game, and yes, that comes from all of the court drama and intrigue, from like the Middle Ages and onwards. And so yes, and so when you were talking about the structures of power, I was also thinking about our ancestral traditions of power, and I think manipulation is very much in that ancestral tradition.
Well, that's patriarchy, right? That's how we access power.
Yeah.
Proximity to male power.
Yeah. And so when we work in a kind of that patriarchal paradigm of power, alliteration. Yeah, the manipulation and soft power and being the iron glove in the iron fist in the velvet glove kind of thing. And you're saying, and I think a lot of the comments are talking to, can we just be the iron fist? and yes.
So I want to bring up something too when we were talking. So what we're doing here is unpacking our subconscious beliefs about power so that we can replace them with a deliberate choice about how we want to be power, how we want to embody power.
And exert it.
Right. And we also talked about how power can be a threat to belonging. So a while ago, I wrote to Gloria Steinem, perhaps you all know her, for advice. She doesn't know me. I don't exist to her.
I know her.
Right, so I wrote to her for advice about how to handle trashing from other feminists, because Gloria Steinem would know a little something about that. And her assistant wrote back to me saying, Gloria says, and I cried, I got an email back from Gloria Steinem's assistant. Here's Gloria's advice. You need to be in regular community, like weekly, with other women who understand what you're trying to do, who have similar goals and similar values, but who will speak the truth to you and care enough to tell you if you're getting something wrong, but they'll do it with love, and they're not going to go write a Medium post about you. So one of the things when we're talking about how new power and embodying power can be a threat to your existing care and circle networks is, if you want to grow your power and embody your power, you're going to need love and support. And you're going to have to cultivate those things deliberately. You do have to cultivate belonging and support to grow power.
Yeah. I mean, it's the, it puts belonging in certain circles at risk.
Right.
And it allows you to belong in new circles.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it doesn't just happen on your own. Like, power is actually a relationship between you and the external world.
Mm-hmm.
So I really appreciate this conversation. It's been so delightful. I always love talking to you. And that's one of the things that I think is coming through in all of these talks about how everything that gets used against you as a source of power is how much these loving conversations with other culture makers helps us build our power, both personally in our careers, in our professions, and culturally.
Yeah, and I mean it's and love doesn't mean that like you and I have a weekly call. We don't get on and just say like, oh my God, I love you so much. It's just like, hey, I have a talk coming up on imposter syndrome. Can you help me like really fine tune certain details?
Yes.
It's that like being willing to like open up and say, here, this is where I'm vulnerable. I think you can help me like maybe close that up a little.
Right. We are leaning on each other for strategic advice and actual feedback on the things that we're making. And that then becomes fuel. That's a source of power, that we can do more of that.
Right. And that's one of the things that first and onlys have to get comfortable with, because they're so used to being the first or the only, and not used to like, oh, there are others I can connect with. There are others who do want to support me. And it's kind of like, wow, I can say yes, and it doesn't like put me at risk. It doesn't like put, I don't have to owe them something. It's just like, wow, people do want to help. If you find yourself with the right circles that you're starting to belong into, they're just going to want to help you.
Yes.
And it's going to be fun.
It is going to be fun. And that is definitely the truth. And I think I want to end on that point, is that there are actually more people who want to see you rise than don't. And sometimes they see your early signs of power before you're willing to admit them to yourself.
Ooh, Kelly, that's a good one. Yeah, like where they might be picking fights with you or saying mean things to you to like keep you where you are, because they're picking up on signs. And there's a way where like, if you just respect them and allow your people to be where they are. I've had the lucky experience of, many friends just kind of meeting me at a new point of like just doing a phase shift into a new point. And it's just like, wow, so great to like be able to explore this new stuff with you.
I want to make one last point that's sort of on my heart, if that's okay. So one of the things that I said earlier in this call was, because I was uncomfortable with power, because I thought power was fundamentally negative, I couldn't recognize it in myself. And so there were a lot of relationships in my life where I thought we were peers and friends and colleagues and are horizontally like aligned in power, had the same levels of power. And in fact, I had significantly more power. And the other person was conscious of that, and I wasn't. And so things that I said or did landed on them in a really painful way, because I wasn't accounting for or seeing the power differential. And so if we hold these unconscious beliefs about power, we can actually inadvertently harm people with our power because we're not even seeing it. And that is so important to understand, is that avoiding power is actually just as much a misuse of power as abusing it.
Yep.
So thank you everyone for being here. Meghna, thank you for being such a powerful influence in my life. And these comments are amazing. Thank you everyone for participating. And you're all culture makers. Thanks for leaning into power with us today. Thanks, Meghna.
Onwards.
Oh no, there's one more thing. Meghna wrote a report called the F&O Leadership Report. It is amazing. It's so insightful. And I put it up on my website on kellydiels.com/links. The first link is a link to Meghna's report that you can download. So thanks, Meghna, for that report. Thank you everyone for being here.
Yes.
Bye everyone.